In this session, I'm going to deal with the Porter's five forces, which typically shape up the industry profitability, which play an important role in deciding the competitiveness of the industry in the long run, and how should an analyst look at evaluating the industry profitability if at all he has to do some kind of analysis with respect to equity valuation process. So, in a simple sense, what we see is the Porter's five forces model is an important aspect in deciding the profitability of the industry in the long run. Why we talk about long run is, in the short run, to a large extent, I see that the profitability is dependent on the demand and supply. So, in short run, probably all these industries, structure, competition, buyers, sellers, all these kind of forces may not impact the profitability at all. So, if I am looking at from a medium to long run kind of a perspective, yes, the five forces which are defined by Porter, they play a role in the company shaping up its competitive strategy and based on that positioning itself towards the profitability aspect. As we all know, the key five factors that are deciding the industry profitability are the threat of new entrants, the threat of substitutes, the bargaining power of the sellers, buyers, as well as the competitors. So these are some of the important things that actually play an important role on the industry profitability. If I want to look at one by one, the threat of new entrants is heavily characterized by the barriers to entry. So the barrier to entry can be created by any mechanism, but if there are higher barriers to entry, it means that the existing players need not be under threat, because it is very difficult for a new player to enter into this industry. So the price wars, cutting down of the prices, price based competition, all those things may not exist in sufficiency, which means the existing players will definitely have some level of pricing power. Then, what are the various factors that can influence the barriers? Economies of scale. The existing players, they are operating at economies, they are having very good positive economies of scale. They were able to optimize their costs drastically. Most of them are producing large volumes at lower cost. So for a new player to enter into this kind of a market, it becomes very costly in the initial stages, which may deter a new participant entering into the market. Similarly, product differentiation can create or break the barrier to entry. If the existing players have already differentiated heavily on the product, they have created their own quality, their own brand value, then if at all a new customer, if at all even a new player enters into that market, the existing customers shifting to that new player will take a heavy amount of switching costs, or probably even it becomes difficult to move from one brand towards a new brand, because the existing brand has already created a quality addition to itself. So switching may not be desired by the existing customers. Sometimes heavy capital and infrastructure requirement, huge deposits are required, huge infrastructure needs to be built up. So the new players, they may feel better not to enter into such kind of an industry. Or from a customer's perspective also, the switching costs are very high. Probably if the customer has to leave the particular company, or if he has to switch from a particular company, there are huge costs involved apart from a new player being identified. Even if a huge penalty needs to be paid off, or such kind of costs are existing with the existing customer, then probably customers may not be willing to switch so easily, which means in that industry the threat of the new player may not exist quite drastically. Even it also is dependent on the government policies. If the government says new regulation, for a new party to enter, there is a lot of licensing related stuff, and these licenses are not granted every day or every month kind of stuff. They are granted only once in a while. So in those kind of cases, the new entrants may not enter because there are stringent licensing and minimum capital requirements and all that are set as a part of the regulation process. And even the distributors' capacity. Already the distributors, distribution channels are operating at full capacity. So even if a new player enters into the market, the distribution channels or any other supporting channels may not be available to support the new player entering into the market. Because of all these things, there could be barriers to entry, which means the threat may not exist very heavily for the new entrant. But if they are on the opposite side, then the barriers to entry go much lower and lower, which can pave the way for the new participants to enter into this kind of a market. Similarly, when I am talking about a threat of new substitutes, we are looking at both the existing substitutes as well as the potential new substitutes that can come up. So if the substitutes, whichever are the existing or the potential, if they are able to show very extraordinary price performance at a lower price, they are able to provide the full substitution benefit of the existing product, then obviously the customers are willing to switch to the new products. So substitutable products play a huge role in terms of customer switching, especially if the switching costs are much lesser. It really doesn't matter whosoever is the product supplier for me, as long as A, B, C, D products are equally substitutable. I don't mind differentiating between A, B, C, D products, and even if I have to switch from one to other, it does not cost me too much. And buyer propensity to substitute, especially what is the willingness of the buyer towards the substitution. Let's say we are talking about the petrol versus gas kind of cars, right? I may say gas can substitute petrol kind of cars. The gasoline based cars can substitute petrol based cars. But what is the attitude of the customer toward the substitution? It may so happen that the petrol based cars have been known for quite a few years, so a kind of a brand loyalty, or not even a brand loyalty, a kind of product loyalty has been existing with each of these kind of products. Now if a new products based on gas are coming into the market, or electricity driven vehicles are coming into the market, which can substitute the petrol based or gas based vehicles, to what is the additional benefit the customer is going to derive by switching into those kind of products is something which has to be analyzed quite heavily. So the threat of substitutes should be looked at from that particular dimension. Similarly, when I look at the bargaining power of the buyers, I look at it in two dimensions. One is the bargaining leverage. If the switching costs are not there at all, if not A, I will buy the product from B. And the availability of substitutes, at least 10 more other products are available which can be substitutable with this particular product. In that case, the buyer will exert very high pressure, and if the buyer is exerting high pressure, the pricing power does not exist with the existing player. So more pricing power does not exist, the profitability may not come up in the long run. So if the switching costs are higher and the substitutes are much lesser, which means that particular industry is operating more, that particular company in the industry is operating more on the lines of a monopoly, or even from an industry standpoint, it is more and more profitable kind of an industry, because the switching costs are much higher. So the buyer cannot exercise any kind of bargaining power. And there could be the other factor associated with the price sensitivity, which could be because of various qualitative factors like product differentiation, the branding, quality related stuff. All these things also will influence the buyer bargaining power. If a particular product is of superior quality, the buyer doesn't even mind paying a premium for it. If there is a very identifiable brand, buyer doesn't bother to pay an additional premium for it. So there the bargaining power will typically go down. Otherwise the buyer tries to exercise some kind of bargaining power. The higher the bargaining power of the buyers, the lesser is the pricing power to the sellers, which could result in the industry's profitability not too much in the long run, means industry attractiveness may not be that heavy. The same way, when we are looking at from supplier standpoint, how many suppliers are there? If there are only one or two suppliers for a particular product, then obviously these suppliers are going to exercise huge power, which means as a producer, they may keep their prices high, which could result in huge cost for the existing players, resulting in profitability is going down in the longer run. But if more number of suppliers are there who are supplying standardized products, probably you are reducing the supplier power. So the more you are able to reduce the supplier power, the more you can get pricing power, which could lead to more and more profitability in the long run. And how much standardized products you are using versus customized kind of products as a part of your production process. If you are using more and more of customized kind of products, hardly you will have one or two suppliers who are in a position to supply those particular products, which could result in suppliers exercising power. So if you are using more and more of standardized products, probably the supplier power also can be coming down. The same way, if the switching costs are very high for the companies in the industry, so the supplier will keep exerting more and more power. Anyhow, this particular person cannot shift to a new supplier, so probably I can increase the price to whatever extent. Similarly, the threat of forward integration. If I feel that if the supplier feels there is a threat for him being acquired by the company, then there is a possibility of lowering the supplier power. Otherwise, there is a possibility of increasing in the supplier power. So the bargaining power of suppliers play an important role in the industry profitability in the long run. Finally, the competitors' power. What is the kind of rivalry that is existing? If you are getting into more and more of rivalry among the competition, it may result in too much of price wars, cutting down the price, which will impact your revenues and the profitabilities. So the industry may not look more and more profitable. So in case there is not too much of product differentiation, homogeneous products where the price cut is playing a major role, that particular industry may not look profitable in the long run. So it all depends completely on how many competitors are existing, what is the use of how to what extent leverage is used in that particular industry. Let's say the leverage is very high, means the usage of fixed costs is very high. So to cover this fixed cost, there is a very good chance that price wars will come into picture. Every company wants to sell more and more products to cover the fixed costs, so they are not willing to wait for longer periods of time. So the covering of the fixed cost means you are selling more volume at a lesser price, resulting in lesser profitabilities. The same logic exists with product shelf life. If the product is having a shelf life of very few days, so within that period itself it needs to be sold off, otherwise you are losing out entirely on that product. So it may so happen that you may compromise on the price and sell it at a lesser price, which will reduce the profitability. All these things will have an impact on the rivalry among the competition. Especially when we are talking about the rivalry among the competition, the focus is more with respect to the price wars, cutting down of the prices, increasing of the cost, which is in a way reducing the profitability of the industry. So anytime we are evaluating the worthiness of an industry, Porter suggests that you look at these 5 factors, evaluate them critically to understand what is the industry structure right now and what could be the profitability of this industry in the long run. But of course, this industry structure is not constant. It can keep changing with time. Today, though there may not be any kind of bargaining power, tomorrow there could be a bargaining power that can come to the buyers. Just for example, let's say today there may not be threat of new entrants, but probably the government policy has changed and it started giving more and more new licenses. That itself creates that itself creates a threat of new entrant. Now the barriers to entry have comparatively come down. There is a possibility of new players entering into the industry, so the pricing power of the existing players will typically come down. So what we are saying is the industry structure will keep changing with time. The moment any changes come to any of these 5 forces, none of these forces is constant forever. Right? For example, the buyer power may change, supplier power may change, and immediately they will have a very huge impact on the price, huge impact on the profitability margins for the company. So all these things have to be consistently evaluated. Let's say if I am talking about more of technological improvement, which may bring some substitutable products altogether, or which may erase some of the substitutable products altogether. So all these things will either have a big impact on the profitability or in a positive way or in a negative way. So what is suggested is any industry we are looking at, the analyst needs to evaluate at that particular point in time what is the impact of these 5 forces on the profitability, what is the possibility of constancy of these forces in the next few periods, or what could be the projected changes that could come up as a part of these forces, and how could they impact the profitability in the long run. Apart from the forces, we also look at transient factors, or sometimes we call them as fleeting factors, which will have an impact on, which may not be directly impacting the profitability, but they definitely affect the industry in a temporary manner. So they have to be evaluated not in isolation, but in terms of their influence on the five forces. Let's say the industry growth, right? Industry is growing, so there are opportunities for many players to play, but that doesn't mean that the profitability of a company will be impacted because of the industry growth rate. It may have a positive impact or it may have a negative impact. So probably it has to be looked at along with the competition. What is the rivalry between the competition that can come up, or because of the industry growth rate there is a possibility of threat of new entrants coming in, which in turn could reduce the pricing power, or on the other side everyone is going to get profitable because more and more opportunities are there. So the more you are able to differentiate your product and eliminate the substitutable products, you are going to increase your profitability. So what we are trying to drive with these fleeting factors is they can have either a profitable or a non-profitable. There is no way you can decide that because of these factors the industry is going to be more profitable or less profitable. It can affect the industry in either of the ways. So because of that, what we say is these are supporting factors which need to be integrated with the five factors which were discussed earlier, and needs to be looked at only in the context of those five factors, not in isolation. Even technology and innovation, it may be impacting everyone in the same way. So it doesn't mean that if the technology is used more and more, the industry is profitable. If the technology is used less and less, the industry is not profitable. There is nothing such kind of a relationship that can be used. So that's where we are looking at. If the technology is used very heavily and it eliminates the competition, it reduces the competition, then it becomes profitable. But if I am using more and more technology and the competition also copies that technology, then it is adding more and more cost, but it is not adding anything much to my profitability. So either of the things can very well happen. So if we see each of these factors, we are trying to look at them in the context of the basic existing five forces itself. Similarly, when I look at government policies, they change with time. So at some points they may be very positive and impact the profitability in a better manner. In some cases they work in a negative manner on the profitability of the company. Same case with the scenario of complementary products and services. Sometimes they may be adding value to the industry, sometimes they may affect the industry in a negative manner. So all these things have to be looked at in combination with the five forces, and the evaluation has to happen with respect to the five forces itself, not in isolation. Then the other important topic which is worth looking at in this chapter is how can the firm achieve competitive advantage. There are various mechanisms in which a firm can look at achieving competitive advantage. Couple of things what it can do is, one, it can alter the existing position of the firm. Okay, probably it can reduce the buyer power, it can reduce seller power, it can reduce substitutes, it can reduce threat of entry, it can reduce rivalry by doing various things, which means its position in the industry it is trying to alter by doing something. That is the way a company can attract some kind of competitive advantage in the industry, or any change that is coming in the industry, it can exploit that change, or it itself can get into changing the shape of the industry structure. So firm structure can be altered, industry structure itself can be altered, or any change that is coming in the industry that can be exploited. Through all these mechanisms, or through any one or more of these mechanisms, firms can typically look at achieving a competitive advantage. So they can reduce the buyer power by increasing the service. So buyer becomes more and more happy. So he will not be worried too much about the price. Direct selling, avoid all the middlemen. So it can reduce the cost to the company, which can increase the profitability, and the buyer is also more and more satisfied. Similarly, you can reduce the supplier power by making sure that you are using standardized products which can be supplied by many people, or outsourcing the products, outsourcing some kind of products to more favorable markets which are cost effective. You can even reduce the substitutes by adding more and more features to your product, by increasing more locations from where the product is available, more distribution channels. So the substitutability becomes much lesser. You can eliminate the threat of entry by probably increasing your fixed costs, use heavy leverage, and probably use more and more R&D, do more and more of fixed costs and grow the firm drastically, so that new competition finds it very difficult to enter into this kind of a business. And even the competition, please reduce that by going more and more into the product differentiations, entering into new markets where not too much of competition is existing, so that you don't need to engage yourself into too many price wars and all. All these things can typically be followed by a company to change its existing position in the industry, get a competitive advantage, and try to increase its profitability. On the other side, any change that comes in an industry, because industry structure need not be constant always. So probably I'm a cloth retailer today, or probably I'm a retailer in a particular business. Now because of the change in the industry structure, suddenly I want to capture that market, so I'm even turning as a manufacturer in that particular product. I'm acquiring a manufacturing firm, or whatever is the mechanism, I'm getting into the manufacturing business also, because the industry structure is changing. Similarly, I'm capturing the opportunity, whatever, whether it is a forward or backward integration, or getting into substitute business. I get out of X business and take up the Y, which is a substitute to the X kind of business. All these things can very well be targeted. So seizing the opportunity, anyone can typically capture this opportunity. So it all depends on how active we are in terms of understanding the changes to the industry and capturing these changes or capturing these opportunities at the right moment. And the third way you can achieve the competitive advantage is to shape the industry structure yourself. You eliminate all inefficiencies in your value chain and increase the value addition in the industry itself, making the industry more and more attractive. Generally, this can be done mostly by the industry leaders, who can shape the industry structure and make it work with their efficiencies, so that they are gaining more and more profitability, and they are becoming the new drivers in that particular industry. So these are various mechanisms to achieve the competitive advantage in a particular industry. So whenever we are trying to look at the industry analysis from a perspective of equity valuation, how do I look at each of these forces? First, define what do you mean by the industry. Identify all the participants, including the buyers, the sellers, the competitors, the new entrants, the substitutes. You identify all these various participants in this particular industry, the strengths and weaknesses of each of these participants, and the kind of influence they have on the profitability of the industry. which of them can change in the medium to long run and which of them may not change at all, and when they are changing, what kind of impact they will have on the profitability. Do a thorough analysis on all these things, based on which you can arrive at a number which can say that this is the growth rate at which I expect this particular industry to be moving in the medium to long run. This is the kind of profitability that can be associated with the industry in the medium to long run. So that kind of an analysis is required before we actually get into one-on-one company kind of an analysis for evaluating the security for evaluating the security from an investment decision standpoint. I hope this basic understanding of the Porter's 5 forces model is clear to you. In case you have any further queries on these lines, you can very well get back to me by giving me a call on the number that I have provided below, or you can even send in an email at vamsidhar@pacegurus.com. Thanks a lot for listening to this session. Thank you very much.